The Twin History Podcast brings together two Black Scotsmen, two twins, one historian and one storyteller to explore the moments that shaped our world. The show features Joe McCann, the eldest twin and resident storyteller, the one always asking why any of this shit actually matters, alongside Johnny McCann, 13 minutes younger, and a historian equipped with the dates, the facts, and the receipts. Every week, they invite listeners to pull up a chair as they unpack some of history's greatest tales. The ones you think you know, the ones you've never heard, and the ones that hit different when told by them. Enjoy.
Understand you guys.
I'm good. No, I spent. I've met people from around the world who are interested in the case, but I did spend a month many years ago in Ireland, and there were some parts there where, I was fine. So I'm game. I can handle this.
Okay, I'll tone it down. If it's,
No, you'll be fine.
Much sense. Thank you, buddy.
I can understand you clearly, so you're good.
Thank you. So this is a Twin History Podcast. We're speaking to Tony Wright today on the Yuba County Five. Tony wrote a book called Things Aren't Right, and we're going to dive into the case and get some answers, as we said to Tony off air. But he said everyone's looking for answers in this case. So.
They are.
So Tony, can I just ask, what can you tell us a little bit about yourself, sir? Like where you're from, like your background, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, I'm Tony Wright. I'm a writer, but by day I work in archives in the state of Michigan here in the United States. So I've been involved in that job that sort of line of work for close to 30 years. And that involves a lot of work with local history, but it also means doing research with like newspapers and primary resources. And over the years, I've helped people who are sort of like local historians and journalists and, aspiring writers to help with their books. And it was probably around 2017 when I first heard about this case and realized no one had written a proper book about the Yuba County Five. And I thought, well, with my background in archives and doing research, I could, dive into a book and write something on my own. And that's what I did beginning in all years 2020, which was quite the year to get started.
It was, the pandemic was happening and the whole world was shut down, wasn't it? So
yes, it was.
Can you tell us a little about the Yuba County Five? So you imagine, like, not every listener will know what the story is. If you just give us a brief outline, and then we'll dive deeper into it later on.
Sure. The Yuba County Five were five friends from Yuba County, California, which is located about 45 minutes north of Sacramento. So it's Northern California. And the five men were Ted Weir, who was 32, Jack Madruga, who was 30, Bill Sterling, who was 29. There was Jackie Hewitt, who was about 24 years old, and Gary Hewitt, who was roughly 25 years of age. Four of the men, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Jackie Hewitt, and Ted Weir, had developmental disabilities where people today would assume they were, or sort of believe they would be on the autism spectrum. And Gary Mathias had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And being sort of like in their 20s and 30s, they were looking for something to do in life. And there was a program in Yuba County, California called the Gateway Project. And it was a nonprofit organization that gave people with developmental disabilities and mental illness issues the ability to get job skills. So they would do various jobs for work. And also they would have like life coaches who would handle their, day-to-day life, teaching them how to live on your own independently, if it's like balancing a checkbook or making your own meals or, taking care of your own personal hygiene and how to take care of medical appointments. But they also had a program that was tied to the Special Olympics. And being tied to the Special Olympics meant that there were different types of athletics that they could be involved with as individuals. And as a team, they were involved with the Gateway Gators, which was a basketball team which competed in the Special Olympics in California. And Ted, Jack, Jackie, Bill, and Gary were part of the team. They were set to play in a tournament for the Special Olympics on Saturday, February 25th, 1978. And if they won that tournament, they would get to go to a major tournament in Los Angeles. And that would have been July 1978. So if they won that tournament, they'd get to go to Los Angeles and be a pay trip. They'd have like a hotel and they'd get tickets to Disneyland, and they'd get to play in their basketball tournament. So these guys loved sports. They were good friends, good guys overall. They were athletic. They, only two of them drove a car, and that would have been Jack Madruga, who owned the Mercury Montego, and Gary Mathias. But Gary wasn't a regular driver, but Jack was. And the other guys had to rely on like parents and family members to drive them around town, or they'd use their bicycle to get around town. But if they had to walk, they could walk 5 to 10 miles. And so it wasn't hard for them to get around town. They understood, well, if someone can't give me a ride, I'll just, walk to my friend's house or walk to the roller skating rink. And these guys were so excited to be part of the basketball tournament on February 25th that the night before, on February 24th, they decided to go to a college basketball game. And it was their favorite team that was playing in Chico, California for an away game. And that trip was about 50 minutes north of town, but they had made trips out of town before as a group, and it wasn't a problem for, the families. They felt like, you guys are going on this big trip on Friday, and Saturday you've got this big tournament. Are you guys up for doing all of this? And they were insistent that, yeah, we can do this. It's no problem. And so they make this trip to Chico. They go to the basketball game. They leave the game and stop at a convenience store. And then they just vanish off the face of the earth. And this is where, the mystery really begins. Like, what happened to these guys and why did they disappear? And then what would lead to their eventual deaths, which has been unsolved for nearly 50 years.
Oh, incredible. Thank you for summing that up. Okay. So you started writing the book in 2019. You couldn't find any other books about the case or any good books about the case. And
yeah,
what first drew you to the case? Was it just this mystery that hadn't been solved, or what was it?
It was a really interesting story, and I thought that I was familiar with the story when I first heard about it on a YouTube channel called Criminally Listed. But then I realized, no, I haven't heard about this case. And the only article that was available before Benji Eagle wrote his Sacramento Bee article was Cynthia Gorney's 1978 article for the Washington Post. It was called like the Feather River Mystery, 5 Boys Who Didn't Come Home. So that article is, it's still really good. And it's still a good starting point for many researchers. And I thought, wow, there's no book about this. And it wasn't featured on like an American TV show like Unsolved Mysteries, which really covered a lot of unusual mysteries in the United States back in the 80s and 90s. And I thought, wow, that's really weird. And no other American TV show or even TV show outside the US had covered the case. And many other podcasts were talking about it. We talked before we went on the air here with like bedtime stories, and there was one called like Dark Curiosities and Things You Should Know. So they're all covering this case, and people are really interested. And I thought, well, now's the time to start writing a book. And it was sort of like lining up interviews with family, law enforcement, trying to get to the case files. And And I knew it was a really interesting story, and there was more to it than what we were hearing on podcast. There's always more, as you know. Um,
Yeah.
you guys with the research that you do, there's things that are on the surface. The more you dig, the more you discover, and the more you discover, it kind of leads you to down different rabbit holes, and you're like, man, I had no idea what I was getting myself into at the time. I thought it was a pretty simple case, to be honest. When I first got involved, I thought maybe this is a getting lost story and there's something else to it. But then the more you talk to the families and everyone else, this project became bigger and bigger and bigger, and meeting people and talking to people, it became quite a book, and it was more than I expected.
Okay.
That's the thing. In reading the book, I love what is it Shannon McGarvey says in your foreword about the realization is that for all the research, the hours of interviews and the data collected, we will likely never know what happened to those 5 young men that night. And I kind of mentioned something similar in one of our first episodes about the JFK case. It's just the like intangible nature of it. It just kind of, you said it yourself, like this case like drove you crazy to a certain extent. It just kind of, you just want to like solve it, but you know that it probably never will be. So that was what I found fascinating about the book and about the case in general.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, the more you look into it, all these sort of strange things pop up with how the night just sort of unfolded, and things that were going on in their lives, and people that they knew, and and the witness who saw them that night, Joseph Shones, and everything just starts to get really, really weird. And I've had a chance to go on that drive a couple times, once during the day and once during the night. The night drive really was more, I mean, it was incredibly eerie, just being up there, because we saw the sun go down and then it became very dark, and we're trying to drive back, and there's really nothing much to illuminate the road other than your headlights. So it's a scary experience being up there. There's no cell reception, like law enforcement's not really up there, and if you did have to call for them, it would take probably forever to get up there. And it's and the more you look to find the answers you need, you can't find them, because there's so much you can find, but you just can't get to the answers on why did you exit the highway, and why did you keep driving in the wrong direction, and why did you abandon the car, and what happened between you and you guys and Shones, and how did you get to this trailer? I mean, all of these like what ifs we're kind of trying to figure out, and it's really difficult, and it will drive you crazy. And I've talked to other people like Shannon McGarvey and Drew Beeson and some other researchers. It's absolute madness at times, and we try to make sense of it and try to like bounce theories off each other. And the more we talk, the more we're like, man, I feel like we're getting somewhere, but we're not. It's just a weird place to be in with research, and I'm sure you guys have been there with your work. I mean, doing the work you do, and it's just like, come on, like, can we just nudge a little bit closer to the truth?
Yeah.
Because I feel like we're trying to move this boulder and we can't do it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, the men themselves, I mean, you gave us a great introduction to the 5 men, but they were often called the boys. So in Yuba, so what does that say about how the town saw them? Did they see them as children? Did they see them as men, or people who just who needed to be taken care of, or were they looked upon fondly? Were they popular kids or popular men? Sorry, I should say.
Yeah. I mean, the families called them the boys because in talking with the families, with some of them, they kind of felt like, as these guys were in, from their late 30s down to their early 20s, although they were older, they kind of were more like teenagers in a way, in their manners and sort of maybe their way of thinking about the world, and then their mindset. And, talking to the family members, they do believe that the men could have been on the autism spectrum, and maybe they saw the world a little bit differently, and maybe were a little bit more naive and gullible in certain aspects of the world. And, they did have some, what we would call street smarts, in talking with the families, but they were nice guys. If you look at Jack Madruga, Jackie Hewitt, Bill Sterling, and Ted Weir, everyone has something really nice to say about them. They were nice, they were kind, they were dependable, they were outgoing, they loved life. They had lots of, dreams that they would have, things that they wanted to do. They found ways of just, enjoying, basketball, or, hanging out at the mini golf course, or going roller skating, or watching movies, or doing this and that. And there was Gary, who struggled with his schizophrenia between the time he was diagnosed in 71 up until 75. But after that, once he got on track with medication and with seeing a doctor, he was doing really well. He was a smart guy, very athletic, very kind, well respected, very talented, like musician, just an overall great guy. And he was working with his stepdad, doing like landscape work. Mm-hmm. And so the guys were nice. But yeah, if you were to meet them, from what the people told me, they said, yeah, you can kind of feel that they've got sort of like a disability where they come across as being younger mentally and maybe emotionally, but overall, they were responsible as a group, and they could go places, and they never had a history of getting lost. And people always have had nice things to say about the guys. The community, yeah, they do remember these guys fondly, and their families have lots of great stories. And that's what was really good about talking to the families. They have not only so many nice memories about their own family members, but the others themselves. So that was incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I loved what you said about Gary Mathias in the book, about you felt you and himself, even though you obviously never met, had that shared connection through music. And you said yourself, when you were younger, some people thought you were quiet as well in school, but you're obviously not. You're very, very chatty now, but but yeah. I loved that you felt that connection with some of the men, and also I think it was it Ted's cousin who said that she had a dream that he had come to her was it Ted just before?
Jack Madruga.
Jack Madruga, who just before they were found, and you said that you had like a conversation with your gran on the phone, and it was of a similar nature. So I just found stuff like that fascinating in the book.
Yeah, because I didn't really realize I'd have all these connections until I started talking to the family members. And that was with Kathy Madruga, who was Jack's niece. She said, before he was discovered, his remains were discovered, she did have this dream where he kind of came to her, and, she kind of realized that, things, okay, I know you're gone, but you're okay. And I had a strange situation. Like, yeah, you're right. I had a strange dream. And I don't remember dreams for whatever reason. My wife will tell me her dreams start to finish. And I'm like, I don't remember anything I dreamed about. But I do remember this one dream, because it was weird. I was in a room, and the phone rings, and I pick it up, and I'm talking to someone. And my youngest daughter had just been born. She's like, how's the baby doing? Is everything okay? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, wait, who am I on the phone with? And I hear this person talking, and it was my grandmother. And I'm like, didn't you pass away? Aren't you dead? Did you pass away? Like, what am I doing in this dream? And like the phone dies, and the phone goes dead, and I like wake up, and I'm like, what was that? Like, I've never had an experience like that. So it's weird. And like, even connecting with the guys, they have a love. Certain guys like Jack Madruga, the love of music. Gary had a love of music as well. They were sort of the big music guys of the group. And yeah, just finding these little connections, and like Jack Madruga kind of being withdrawn in school. And yeah, I get I'm a chatty guy now, but being much younger in school, I was more reserved. So, but yeah, it was so nice to meet the families, learn more about the guys, find connections, and even other people that have read the book have found connections with the guys. And I think that's really, really cool. I've talked to someone, people, there's a few guys who live near Manchester, and they're kind of in that part of England. And they said, we've got connections with, like, one guy's a drummer and played in the band and liked basketball, and Gary was in the band. And, even people that said, like, we have family members who are on the autism spectrum, or someone who may be dealing with schizophrenia. And you hear from people from around the world who've talked to me about the case, where they do have family members who may be on the spectrum or struggling, and they find that connection. And also with maybe some of the things the guys did, like basketball, like people said, yeah, I like basketball too. And, I worked somewhere like Jack Madruga as a dishwasher and did this and did that. So that's what's really bringing a lot of people into the case. They can really identify with some things about this case and the men themselves. And once you have that kind of connection, it feels a little extra special, and you're more invested within the case.
Yeah, that's an incredible thing about the book. You can't see yourself in the men, and that had never happened until the book was released. So congratulations on that. But one thing, so you said they went to a convenience store. I guess in the UK we just call that a shop. Just where UK, like, so they went to a convenience store and they got snacks, and then why is the route afterwards so baffling? Because they're what, 50 miles from home, or around 50 miles from home, and they
about
go
more closer to 70. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, 70
That's
miles
right.
from home, and then they go in the completely opposite direction. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
It's really weird. Yeah. So they go into the convenience store and they get like candy bars, and they'll get like a Pepsi, and someone was drinking, I think it was Gary, who was drinking milk just because his medication made his stomach a little upset.
Yeah.
So he would drink milk, and then we get different types of candy bars. And here in the US, we had like, I don't know if they have them in Scotland, but did you remember the old Hostess pies? Did you have those?
No,
It's American. It's very American. You would see it. It's basically like, it's almost like a wannabe type fried pie, but it's filled with like very sugary, like cherry, lemon, chocolate, strawberry filling, and then covered with more sugar on top. I mean, it's like, you would see them like, this is what Americans eat. But I mean, it's what they were getting after, and like potato chips, and they were just, eating. The lady who waited on them said, man, these guys are eating a lot of junk food. Like, she was shocked that a bunch of adults would eat this much. But they got in the car and drove away, and that she saw them, and she said they were fine. They were having fun. Yeah. I mean, she was a little annoyed they came in at closing time, but you know, she kind of relaxed after a minute, realizing that they were going to go through the store really quickly and just get their stuff and leave. And it seemed like they understood she was closing and didn't want to be an inconvenience. But they get on the road to go home, and all they had to do was drive down a part of the highway out of Chico, and it splits in two. So there's like one that goes into Marysville, where 4 of the guys lived. And then there's one part of the highway that runs parallel that goes into Yuba City, where Bill Sterling lived. And Jack Madruga knew both highways. But at a certain point near a town called Oroville, you have to exit the highway to get on the Oroville-Quincy Highway, which would have taken them through town and into the Plumas National Forest. And to get to Plumas, you've got to go by the Bidwell Bar Bridge, which is a big bridge, and you're over a reservoir and near like a giant dam. So you would know those sort of, even though it's night, you could probably make out those landmarks and say, this isn't the right way home. Because if you see something like that, it doesn't matter where you're traveling, where you're from. There's probably parts around town and outside of town where you're driving like, oh, wait a minute, did I make a wrong turn? Like, oh, I shouldn't be here. I got to turn around, or I can't believe I made that mistake. And we've all had that happen to us. But these guys just kept on driving. And to get up into the Plumas, it's a winding road. And the highway for them home is straight. It doesn't veer off really crazy or anything like that. It's a straight shot down the highway. And once you get up into the mountains, you really have to decrease your speed because you can't go as fast because the roads wind, and it's kind of, there's a few almost like blind type spots where you're kind of like not sure about traffic. And there's also wildlife up there. So, you know, like a deer or something's going to cross the road and you're going to be like, wow, great. You know, I don't need to hit that tonight and, you know, damage my car. But yeah, it's a slow drive. And then at a point at that time, the road was gravel, and Jack Madruga, who was driving, hated unpaved roads. And if the road's unpaved and the weather's bad, like it was up there, you're going to have like potholes in the road, and they're going to be like, no, I don't want to drive on this. And somehow they ended up near what's called the snow line. Once you start to see where it's like, oh, there's a lot of snow up here, and we've hit like a literal wall almost of snow, and we can't go any further because the roads are closed. And from where they abandoned their car at about 4,500 feet in elevation, that's way, way, way off course. And it's, according to the people who live up there, that's like the middle of nowhere. If you get your car stuck there late at night, especially in the winter, you're going to be in trouble because you're not really going to find another car passing you by to help you out. But there was Joseph Shones up there, which is a little suspicious in my opinion.
Yeah. With Joseph Shones, sorry, Joe, with Joseph Shones, this is a problem about not being in the same room, Joseph. But with Joseph Shones, one of his neighbours said the unfortunate thing for the 5 men was the person they came across was him that night. So what made him like unreliable, Joseph Shones? And I mean, some people speculated that he may have had something to do with the disappearance, but I think you're saying in your book you don't think he did, but he knows more than he's saying, and you found him to be a frustrating person in general because he's not let authorities know. I don't know if he's still alive, but he's not let authorities know all that he knows.
Yeah, he did pass away, I want to say maybe around 2000, let's say between 2003 and 2008. I want to say it's probably closer to 2008. But yeah, he's like what we call the unreliable narrator. He had a past that involved, you know, being drunk in public and getting arrested for drunk driving and not telling the truth. His former neighbor had stories to share, and his record was included in the investigation. So some of the things that he had done in his past where he wasn't truthful and being dishonest, you know, kind of came back to haunt him. And you're right, he really wasn't being truthful with law enforcement because there's 2 interviews. There's the first interview they did, and you get a story and you're like, okay. And then you get the second story and you're like, okay. But at the same time, the press was calling him in California. These different newspapers, you know, in California are like, oh, hey, are you the guy that saw these guys? And it's like, yeah. And they're like, oh, can we talk to you? He's like, yeah. And if you piece these newspaper articles together and start reading them, he's telling different stories to different newspapers. The newspaper in Sacramento, he'll tell a story. The newspaper in LA, the newspaper like, you know, in Chico or, you know, somewhere else. And you start reading, you're like, whoa, these stories don't make any sense. And you're adding all these new things to your story. And it's just the little things, and none of them are consistent. And I heard a podcast recently, and they were interviewing a guy who's a detective who interrogates criminals. And he says, the only thing I do is I'll let them talk for an hour. I'll let the criminal talk for an hour, and I'll stop him. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I missed what you said. Can you start over from the beginning? Yeah. And he says, once you start over and the story starts to deviate and just gets way like out of hand, he's like, I know I got you. But if you're sticking straight with the story, then I'm okay. I'm going to see what's up here. But once your story starts to deviate, which Joe's story deviated many times, everyone's like, what is this dude's deal? Even the family members have said, we just don't believe the guy. And I said in interviews, I think it was with the Missing Enigma that you mentioned, because he did research too on the case, and he said like we agree like 5% to 95% of what comes out of Shones's mouth is the truth, and we can't figure out, are we on the higher side, or are we on the low side? So it's and he would have been interesting to interview, and there was a tape of an interview with him and the families. And Missing Enigma and I were able to get that tape and get it digitized, or actually Mopac Audio digitized it. And like Mopac Audio, there was me and the Missing Enigma. We all tried to get through the tape because the quality had deteriorated over the years. But what we could grab information wise was pretty fascinating in spots. Like Shones was saying, I wasn't drinking, and there wasn't much snow the guys got stuck in, and just odd things from the guy. And someone said he was the gift that keeps on giving, and that's true. He just keeps talking, and he just keeps digging a hole with his mouth somehow. And oh man, it's hard to keep track of his stories.
Do you think he was actually there? Because some people said he wasn't. He's maybe just inserted himself into the story. The thing, I'll give him credit for meeting the family, but then you point out in the book that he, meeting the families, but you point out in the book that there was a reward, so he was maybe trying to get the reward. So maybe it wasn't quite like an altruistic move on his part. But he was definitely there that night. He did speak to them. He did see them.
I believe he was there. And I have a friend who helped me with the book, Dr. David Hayes, who believes maybe he wasn't there and may have gone somewhere else. Because there are cabins up that way. And someone even mentioned that. Could he have tried getting into those cabins or trailers up there and tried stealing what was like equipment or anything that could have been in there of value to him? And when he comes back, he sees the guys and he's like, oh, witnesses, this isn't good. And he kind of interacts with them, maybe yells at them. But then again, I kind of believe he was in his car, passed out, drunk, and these guys come up the road and he's like, I'm saved. And these guys are like, actually, we're lost. Our car is stuck in the snow, and he's mad and drunk and yells at him. And he could do something to chase him into the woods, into the Plumas National Forest. I think he was there. There are people who believe that he really wasn't there and he was doing something else, whatever that was. But there is a witness who saw him drive up that road sometime close to 6 p.m. the night the men went missing on the 24th. She's like, why is he driving north on this road? He should be driving south back home. He's going somewhere where he's going to get stuck, and he can't get out of that situation if he's stuck even at 6 p.m. And, the sun, in California would have been setting February at that time. And she knew, like, hey, you're going from dusk to night. And, not too many people want to be on the road, especially in the winter. So, and that's another thing we've talked about with Shones. If he's up there, let's say he gets there 6 p.m., has his heart attack within the hour, okay, that's 7 p.m. The guys don't show up till 11:30. He's been up there 4 hours. And people have said with his vehicle, which was a VW Bug, that if he left it idling, it had a type of engine where it would only blow like lukewarm air at best. And if your temperature is dropping, up in the mountains, and it's getting cold, and you don't have like a heavy winter coat or, even like supplies like a blanket or anything, you're kind of in trouble. And you're having a heart attack, and it's going to be hard for you to do anything. And if the guys get there at 11 and then you start telling the story, well, 4 hours later, I get out of the car probably around 3, 4 in the morning and make an 8-mile walk that lasts another 4 to 5 hours. It's like, come on, dude. Like, what is this story you're sharing, man? Come on. Because if there's snow and there's water and there's mud and you get your feet wet and you get your pants wet, I mean, that's going to accelerate hypothermia. That's going to put you in a really bad situation where if you've had that heart attack, and hearing from people with their stories, like, hey, someone said I had a heart attack once, and I I couldn't walk 8 miles. I had a hard time, getting to the hospital to get taken care of.
Yeah.
His stories are just out there. And like I said, unfortunately, he's not with us. And you're right, it is nice he met with the families, but we caught him in some lies, but it wasn't surprising to us. And that's unfortunate. Just because, like with a guy like Shones, you don't know what you're getting.
Of course.
He could be a book. Someone said he should be a book, and I'm like, you're right. I wish I could write a book on him, and that would be something. Absolutely.
It'd be great. I'd certainly read that. And well, Shones walks 8 miles and down the mountain. He claims to anyway. But the men, that's an odd detail about the case, isn't it? That the men abandon their own car. They have snacks in there. I'm assuming they're warmer in there than they're going to be outside. So that's an odd detail. So they abandon the car, and what happens after that, please, Tony?
Well, they abandoned the car, so they would have to, there had to be some kind of moment where they had to figure out, like, what's our next step? Like, where do we go? So something gets them out of the car, and you're right, the car would have kept them warm. And the Montego had a working heater. It had about maybe a fourth of a tank of gas when authorities found it. So they could leave the car idling for short periods of time and let the car warm up and then shut off the engine and do that if they wanted. But something's got to force you out of that car. Either an idea of, well, we did pass somewhere on the way up, maybe we can walk and, call a tow truck or something. But what they do is, instead of walking south down the road, they walk north on the road. And where they are in the Plumas National Forest in the US, if something's a national forest, you're allowed to do like logging and mining and fishing and hunting, and that's legal within the forest. And so there were these logging roads, and they may have, and we talked to the Forestry Service who oversees the forest, and someone who worked there said we had sent a snowcat, a vehicle that could flatten the snow, and would lead up to the trailers where they ended up, which was about 12 miles northeast. So for whatever reason, the men walked that way. And the person I talked to who worked with the Forestry Service, they said you could get turned around very easily if you're not experienced, walking through the woods. You can kind of almost compare it to, like, I'm sure you guys have seen the Blair Witch Project, where they just keep walking in circles. They just, they think they know where they're going, but they don't. And law enforcement said, if they saw the tracks, they may have thought, oh, a vehicle may have gone up this way, and we can get that way. And they're not wearing proper winter gear. I mean, where I live in the U.S., we experience winter and the harsh conditions, and these guys only had like tennis shoes on and blue jeans and maybe a light spring jacket. So that's not going to give you much warmth or much protection, and your hands are exposed and your head's exposed. And if you are walking in snow and say it's not perfectly packed down and you get your feet wet, that's going to excel hypothermia. And that's what really scared the investigators was, man, we lost this time, this window of opportunity to find these guys, because it was days before their car was found. And they're like, oh no, if these guys have been in the elements and they've been walking in the snow, and if they've gone through even a snowdrift by accident and got, pants and shoes wet, and they haven't found a place to make a fire, they're going to be in really bad shape. And they were like, they'd be lucky if we find them alive. And that was one of the things they said early on. So they knew, these guys out of the car, this is bad. But they didn't know where they went. When they find the car like 4 days later, they're like, okay, here's the car. And the question was for them, almost like what you guys were saying about, was Shones really there? They were wondering, were these guys really up here? Did someone else drive this car up here? And if they were up here, where'd they go? Did they walk? They were more, it seems like they were thinking more, okay, they're going to walk south and maybe they'll ask someone for directions. But, if they kind of go east or west, they're kind of running along the terrain, which is really rough, and you can't walk across the terrain of the Plumas, because if you're in the foothills of the mountains, you're That's not easy terrain to walk. And there's all these little creeks and streams, and there's, opportunities if they fall into a stream. That's not good. They could get almost swept away at a point, or, hit the water and, freeze to death because of the exposure. So they really had to do this meticulous grid to find these guys and search for them. And that again is something we don't know what exactly they searched, because they never left behind any record of saying this is where we searched and this is how much time we spent in this area. All you got was sort of this blanket, yeah, we searched the area. And that doesn't help anyone, especially the families.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Go ahead, Joseph.
No, so they were reported missing almost immediately. Is that correct? The men?
Yeah. So they were supposed to be home probably by midnight. Mm-hmm. So, by the, once the 24th is over, maybe you get to the, midnight, and they don't show up. And the family's like, well, where are they? Why wouldn't they come home? Why didn't they call? They always call when they're running late. And the parents are up all night. They call the sheriff's department first thing in the morning and say the guys are missing. But when the sheriff's department hears the ages, 20s and 30s, they're like, well, guys go out on Friday night and party, and, they pass out on the couch, and, they come home the next day and they're like, you don't understand. And they basically said, you're basically found out, hey, 24 hours. If they're not back in 24 hours, call us. So they had to do their own thing. They had to go to Chico and ask people and call places and maybe get some missing persons flyers started, and maybe think of something like a reward, because Saturday they even went to the place they were supposed to meet for the Special Olympics tournament. They were supposed to get on a bus and go down to Sacramento. And there's a department store in town where they were going to wait in the parking lot and just get on the bus. And they went to the parking lot and no one was around. And they thought, okay, did they get down to Sacramento somehow? And there was also feelings of like, did their car break down on the highway? Did they get a flat tire? Could they not find a payphone? Because this is a time of like, you need a payphone if you're going to call someone, or you can find a shop where someone has a phone and they'll let you use it. And they were just trying to call people, and eventually law enforcement said, okay, we'll file a missing persons report 8 p.m. Saturday. And it wasn't until Tuesday the 28th when they found their car, because there were all these days of missed opportunities and not being able to find them. And it was just, that's really unfortunate. The way the case got started was those missing days where time was of the essence, and it was just absolutely frustrating for everyone.
You said, Tony, that in the book you felt that, and I loved that you taught an American history class, because that's something I did myself. But you said you would do like an exercise where you'd give your students a case study on Christopher McCandless, the man from Into the Wild, the film and the book. And when they were reacting to it, some of them were sympathetic, some of them were indifferent, and you compared that to how people may have reacted in 1978 when they heard about the men going missing, and also because the men, obviously, they were seen to be on the autism spectrum, or they would be now. So how do you feel that impacted the initial investigation and how things were reported in the media?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because with the story like Christopher McCandless, they see here's this guy, very successful, goes into the Alaskan wilderness and vanishes. You have mixed emotions about it, differences of opinions. And it's just like this case, you're absolutely right. When the guys went missing, they said, they're handicapped, they have a disability. Here are these guys, they're missing. And with some people, they probably feel the same way people today hear about it. Well, who let these guys out of the house, and why didn't they have an adult with them? And isn't this what you expect? And you add this guy to the mix who has schizophrenia. It's a crazy guy with 4 dumb guys, and it's like, come on, that's not how it is. And that's the way it was reported in the paper. They start, changing the wording and make it more, inappropriate is what we would say today. You know, they used the word retarded for the men, and that was, you know, once the story hit, that's the word that was used. And then I think a lot of people were like, oh, okay, you know, that's sad, but
Yeah.
you know, and it's still like that today. We still see like comments on YouTube and other social media platforms where people are making comments about the case, and you know what they're trying to say, and it's like, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
You don't think these guys are smart enough. And the family member said they knew if they're in trouble, go get help, and you know, not to do this and not to do that. And that was, you know, that's still frustrating for a lot of us who talk about the case today, even people who talk about Gary, because if you mention schizophrenia, people are also automatically going to say, well, you know, there's your culprit. And it's like, there's plenty of YouTube channels and podcasts by people who have schizoaffective disorder. And they say, look, this is how I manage my life. And this is the thing, these are the things I look out for. There's a lady in Canada, her name's Lauren. She does a great job like chronicling her life with schizoaffective disorder. And there's other people out there too who have done great work on YouTube to educate the public. And even people who are on the autism spectrum today, you know, even with shows like Love on the Spectrum and podcasts, and people on social media are showing like, hey, you know, I am on the spectrum, but this is how I manage things. And this is how I manage my life. But yeah, the reporting wasn't helping. And there was also, this is where the beginning of the misinformation begins with the case, because when they hear like, oh, they're Special Olympics basketball players, these guys must be like 6 foot tall and, you know, super athletic. And it's like, they're all like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and, you know, LeBron James. And I'm like, nah, these are just average guys. I mean, Ted was the tallest at 6 feet. I mean, these were just average sized guys on a basketball team. And so, yeah, that's where a lot of the misinformation began, and a lot of the wrong, like, information was being spread out, sort of like, you know, dehumanizing people, you know, with disabilities. And yeah, I it's still going on with the case. And at the time, yeah, you're right. It really hurt. And it did make people indifferent and a little bit callous. And it's just so frustrating. So hearing about it today and still reading about it today, the way people talk about the case, like, oh, it's no real mystery. You're like, okay, you did 5 minutes of Wikipedia. You know everything.
Yeah.
Well, in June, was it, the men were discovered? So almost 5 months. Well, 5 months after they went missing.
Not 5 months, Joe. It was. Oh yes, it was 5 months. Sorry. So my maths are not. My maths.
You give them part of, like, you get February, March, April, May, June. So yeah, you give about 4.5 months or so. Yeah, it's all good.
I apologize.
No worries.
Maths was always my weak point at school as well. It wasn't my strongest point. But so the snow melts in June in 1978, and the bodies were found, at least. Can you tell us what happened? And I believe, was Ted Weir the first one to be found? Yeah,
so June of 1978, it was probably around the 6th, I believe. There were a group of guys, there was like, maybe 3 guys riding motorcycles through the Plumas. And it's been a bad year for winter. It was like a bad year for snow and rain. And like some of the trees had fallen over and had blocked the road. And there was still snow melting up in the Plumas. And they kind of felt like sometimes when snow melts, there's like mud and rock and debris in with it. And they're like, these roads aren't as passable as we expected. And they were really upset because you're trying to take these back roads through the Plumas, and they kind of feel like their day's been a waste. So what they do is they stop at a place near the Granite Basin, Daniel Zink campground, and they remember there's a map. If we look at the map, we'll just find let's figure out an easier way to get home, because, you know, today's not the best day to ride our motorcycle. When they get to that area, they kind of get hit by like a whiff of decomposition, and to them it's much, much stronger than like an animal that had passed or that had died. And so they're like, this is really weird. They kind of explore the area, and there's trailers in that campground area that were used by the Forestry Service or like fire workers or logging people, just as a place to stay overnight if you have to be up there. And it has bunk beds, and there's food and other supplies, and there's propane heating. And they get to one of the trailers and notice like a front window's busted open, and they're like, what's going on here? And they can smell the smell. And so one of the guys just puts his head into the trailer and sees like, hey, there's a dead body. We got to call law enforcement. And they eventually come up and examine the site. And they start talking to other members of law enforcement. Like, I think these are our guys. This is Ted Weir that they find, because he's wearing the same clothes. He has like his wallet and sort of other like personal effects, where like a ring and I think a watch too. And they're like, hey, this is exactly what this guy was wearing when he went missing. He's resting on one of the bunk beds. He's been wrapped up in sheets. He's badly frostbitten. He's lost weight. And okay, someone's been in this trailer with him, because there's these cans of food that have been open. So what's going on? So they find Ted, and families are like, okay, what was he doing in the trailer? How did he get there? Why did no one check this trailer? And as these questions are being answered, they begin to, all right, let's expand the search area around the trailer. Are we going to find anyone else? So within a day or two, they find Jack Madruga and Bill Hewitt's remains scattered on like opposite sides of a road. So they're like, okay, we found these two, and they're about maybe 3 to 5 miles south of the trailer. And they're like, okay, how did this happen? And then probably like a mile southeast of the trailer, kind of east of the trailer, they find Jackie Hewitt's remains. And they're like, again, like scattered remains. And they're like, okay, what happened? Did these guys get to the trailer together and then they leave at different times trying to get help? There's no sign of Gary. And according to the families and again, this is another frustrating thing about the case, there's no detailed log of the crime scene, because that is, the crime scene where they found Ted's remains. I mean, there are pictures, but I wasn't privy to see them, which I understand as a family member. But there weren't really like detailed notes of like what it looked like in there. There wasn't a diagram of the room. There wasn't like an inventory, like we found these things and this was unusual. Because family members claimed that something was written. They had like a chalkboard on the wall, and someone was writing on that. And then there were pieces of paper with handwriting on it. And the writings were believed to be Jackie Hewitt and Gary Mathias's handwriting. So if all this handwriting's in there, that gives you clues on who's in the room. They do find Gary's shoes in the trailer, his tennis shoes or his trainers, and they're in there. And Ted doesn't have shoes in there. So there's this belief like Ted was wearing probably more durable shoes, and maybe Gary saw those and thought, if I put these on, because he was wearing like, I think he had like Converse sneakers, like Chuck Taylor's. That's not going to help you out in the winter. And so maybe Gary took those shoes to get help, because Gary realized, I don't have my medication. I'm in trouble if I don't, get back on my regiment, and let me find help as quickly as possible. And it's kind of believed that maybe someone else is in the trailer and like, Gary hasn't come back. Now I got to go get help. And then, everyone kind of succumbed to the elements, because they didn't have heat in the trailer. There was a way to heat it, but I don't know if every person sees a propane tank next to a trailer and like, how do I turn it on? And how do I turn on the heater inside, to warm the trailer? Another issue was water. There's nothing in the way of running water inside the trailer. They could melt snow and drink that, or do what's worse is eat snow, especially when it's cold and you're suffering from hypothermia. You're just eating cold snow and the whole mess with that. So all these questions start to pop up. Okay, why'd they go north of the car? Why did they walk 12 miles? Why are they in a trailer? Why didn't they burn something? Like, there were matches inside the trailer, and there were actually a bunch of paperback novels. Like, why couldn't they put those in a pile and start a fire or try to
Mhm.
burn like wood, like any furniture was made out of wood or like a mattress, something, there would have been a visible smoke plume to us, and we could have,
Yeah.
at least tracked this down, or someone could have been like, is something burning? Like, what's on fire? Like, who's doing this? And someone would have gone to investigate. But again, another question was, well, we told you, or the Forestry Service told law enforcement, well, we told you about the trailers and you never went
Yeah.
because you said it was too far away and no one would ever walk that far. And here we are, finding these guys in a trailer 12 miles northeast with still no answers on why they went that way. And, and by the time they found Jackie and started the funerals, you're looking around June 10th through June 12th. And within 7 to 8 days, they call off the investigation like, well, we can't find Gary. So case closed. And that's where it ended in 1978, was towards the 20th or 21st of June when they said, we put a lot of money into this case and put a lot of time, and we're not going to find this guy. So they got lost, case closed. And it was a closed case for nearly 40 years until podcasters and YouTubers were looking for a new case to bring up on their podcast. Because if you have a podcast, you can talk about topics that everyone knows about. Like, people are still interested in the Zodiac and D.B. Cooper, or, I'm sure there's cases in, Scotland of people going missing and strange things happening where people are like, oh yeah, that case, that was really fascinating. But then when people bring something new into the mix, you're like, ooh, I've never heard about this. Tell me more. And there was something about that case where it took off 2017, 2018, and people were saying like, I've never heard of this case. Tell me more. And anytime people talk about this case, it gets a lot of views and a lot of listeners, because people are like, oh, I know that case. I want to hear more about it. And it's part of a series of maybe like 5 cases that I've kind of discovered over the past, about 8 years, 9 years, just doing more true crime research. And people are very fascinating. And that's like I said, I could talk forever about this case. We could have like a 10-hour podcast.
We're happy for you to do so.
The Twin History Podcast is a Lost Cosmonauts production, produced by me, Virag Eszter Tóth. Additional producers are Dale McGoldrick, Johnny McCann, and Joe McCann. Written by Johnny McCann and Joe McCann. Original music and score by Kevin MacLeod. The podcast is available wherever you get your podcast. You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok under the handle The Twin History Pod. You can email us at thetwinhistorypodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.